situation of mental health at the time of COVID-19, and what have been the main issues vis-a-vis mental wellness?
No, I think we need to understand this, that when a big illness like this happens, highly prevalent illness like this happens, so much talked about illness like this happens. See, that's what a pandemic is. Pan, everyone, everybody. So what happens is that you will have people who would start with having anxiety around what if I get the illness or what if my family gets the illness. Then if you are diagnosed, then the worry of, will I, at the peak, the worry was around that will I get the treatment immediately or not. Then it's about how many days I would have to be in isolation or quarantine. So the individual struggling with that aspect of being isolated, whether it is in the hospital or at your own home. Then the worry that what if other people in my family get it because I have got it. Then coming out of that entire process of the illness and then going back to life. So there are whole transitions. And you add on to this the uncertainty of the future, the economic impact, the bereavement and grief impact. So when all of this is put together, it is human, natural to experience anxiety. And that's why mental health conversations like this are important, because we need to ensure that the right kind of support reaches people to be able to be helped in these difficult circumstances.
Which are the most vulnerable sections of the population when it comes to mental illness and mental health?
Like I said earlier, a pandemic affects everybody. I don't think it's so much about the age bracket or the background of the population. I think the differentiator is in the support system. So let's say if you are a child, but you have brilliant support system around you, then the impact will be less. Similarly, if you're a senior citizen and you have people rallying around you and supporting you, the impact will be different. And you may well be a young adult who has not got the illness, but you are living in a city far away from family and you're constantly worried about them or something's happening back home. So then you are more vulnerable to it. So I think the key aspect you need to understand is wherever support systems are strong, vulnerability becomes less.
What about the mental health of children with no school and no games?
There is no substitute for meeting friends on a playground. There is no substitute for going out for children, especially than any other population. There is no substitute for that. But we also need to appreciate that in this situation, what was our alternative? The alternative was that at least online classes gave some opportunity to see friends, talk to friends, see your teacher, take a few self-tests and exams, get in the rhythm of life. And then again, if the support system is good and your parents encourage you to explore hobbies, your parents encourage you to talk to your friends, do video meetings with friends, you are connected with your extended family and cousins and grandparents and uncles and aunts, then what happens is the entire effect of the pandemic that gets much diluted.
Can you share with us any data on what has been the rise in number of patients seeking mental help handled by Fortis since COVID outbreak?
No, but I don't think that answer is possible. Try and understand this, and I've said this on various platforms, that right now to say that X percentage has increased would be incorrect. We'll all know probably in a year down the lane. Right now in the thick of the things, it's very difficult to put a figure or a number to it. What you need to understand is, COVID or no COVID, 1 in 5 people in the world suffer from a mental ailment. COVID or no COVID, depression is the single largest illness in the world. 300 million people globally suffer from depression, pre-COVID also. So mental health has been a concern worldwide, and there has been a dearth of experts in terms of population ratio in India for a very long period in time. So how you need to understand this is distress has become more. So people are expressing their distress more. Do not confuse distress with disease. So if you are going through an anxiety, something's happening at home, or you are going through a quarantine, you talk to a friend or talk to a cousin, opened up and said that, I was not sleeping well or I was struggling. Now that's also a mental health issue, but at a distress level.
Do you think we are talking about mental health as much as needed? Where does India stand in mental health awareness in comparison to other developing countries?
Why should we compare any country to another country? If you do a dipstick worldwide, developed or not, or developing or not, stigma continues to be one of the biggest reasons why people are not able to seek help. And stigma is as much in developing countries as much is there in the developed countries. We need to work a lot in India. There is no question about it. We've seen a significant change, especially in the urban population, the population which has been largely connected through the internet and has been reading a lot over the last decade or so. A lot of acceptance has happened, but there's a long way to go, including for the urban population. There's a long way to go. But I feel that as you go towards tier 3 cities and rural India, one of the reasons we need to also understand is what will you do with the awareness if you also do not ensure accessibility?
Exactly.
Accessibility and awareness also go hand in hand. You just can't try to end the stigma and not provide a solution. And I think that's where telemedicine in terms of telepsychiatry is, I think, a game changer for a country like India, where there is a dearth of experts, because it creates the last mile connectivity. I mean, you just need a phone with enough data to have a video call. And the cost comes down drastically, because if you are living in some district and your nearest mental health expert is a few hundred kilometers away, then the sheer planning, the travel, the cost of it comes down drastically. So I feel one, telemedicine is the future for a country like ours to ensure the last mile reach. I also feel training at various levels, right from panchayat, Anganwadi, primary healthcare levels, to ensure that early identification, screening, and intervention happens at the primary healthcare level, so that the experts that we have focus a lot more on secondary and tertiary levels in mental health.
There have been several reports on how helplines started to report drastic rise in calls, and especially they are COVID-specific mental health helpline.
Yes, right now we are getting a lot of calls. Yes. But again, lot of calls does not translate into more disease is something we all need to understand. Helplines have to be there. We need many more helplines. In fact, in vernacular languages, and awareness about that helpline is also very important. There's a lot of human resource required to maintain helplines. Again, that's a place where the concerns are.
So at a time when COVID victims don't even get proper medical attention, do you think the government even acknowledges mental health as an issue?
I'm nobody to answer what the government does or not. I'm a healthcare practitioner. It's not my job to figure out who's doing what. In any case, I'm a mental health practitioner. I don't even look at blames. I think people who look for blames are not able to understand the gravity of the situation. We are where we are because collectively we have failed each other. I don't come from the thought process of let's find who was at fault. We were at fault. We as a society collectively lost our guard. No point blaming others for it. Every individual who's attended a marriage, every individual who went to a party, every individual who went to a shopping mall, every individual who went to a restaurant, every individual who decided to sit in cars with friends and have parties is equally responsible. Why blame individuals or people? A government's job is not to put a mask on my mouth or my face. I mean, I should have been aware of the fact that the mask shouldn't have gone. Nobody said that COVID was over. Not one. If you would pick up the call and you would call anybody, the COVID messages continue to happen on phones. It's like saying that, why don't people stop on the red light? What is the government doing about it? The government has told you there's a challan if you cross the red light, but if you still use personal discretion, mankind needs to upgrade itself. And we need to first sort our own individual self and then look at what we can do collectively, then look at accountability. You don't do the reverse. Societies which do reverse will not grow. You look at the growth that one can do. Solution is the answer. Analysis of problem, there is a whole life to do that.
But what do you have to say about the Kumbh Mela? The government is organizing the Kumbh Mela. They are participating in elections.
I don't think that is a fair question. Because you have a right to ask that question, or I have a right to ask that question if I was also following COVID appropriate behavior, which has not been the case. Were the restaurants not full? When there was a limit on marriages that there should be, in some cities it was 25, some it was 50. Were not 100, 150 people coming in? Why? I think we need to understand in life, blaming, finger pointing is the easiest deflection that is there. Societies grow when you also have self-responsibility before asking for accountability. First, bring a change in yourself, then ask a question. But you don't get to say, okay, this and this happened, so fine, I could have also gone for a party. That's nonsense. What do you tell children?
But at a time when...
from role models, from sports role models, from media role models, we can keep looking at who did this, who did that. Like I said, the time to evaluate accountability should be there, but that's not the time right now. Right now, society needs a last bit of optimistic, positive, responsible push by their own selves to first get out of this phase, realize and learn that we don't let the next phase happen, and then let's talk accountability. In the middle of a pandemic, accountability is just an intellectualization, which I feel has no purpose whatsoever.
How would you advise people who are dealing with loss and grief due to the untimely demise of their loved ones?
Grief is a very, very personal experience, and nobody can give anybody else advice on it, because my loss is my loss. The one thing that we can do and we should do is not let a person going through grief feel isolated. So that's where the role of friends, family, cousins, extended family, colleagues, neighbors, that's the key, which means the support systems need to be there. But the individual grief, it's for the individual, and based on so many aspects, it takes its own time for any individual to resolve it.
Do you think online therapy sessions are as effective as personal sessions?
In the given situation, yes. Would you rather have a personal session with me and you both wearing a mask? And you would not be able to see each other's expressions. That's one point. Second aspect, I already mentioned very clearly and unambiguously, telemedicine is the future to ensure last mile connectivity. It's all easy to say what is more effective. If you are living in a village where for, let's say, 200 miles or 300 miles, there is no doctor available, are you going to tell that person that no, wait for a physical doctor to come here, or take 5 days out of your life and take 3 other people and go all the way? Or would you give them a service where that individual can right there at so much less cost still get the intervention? These comparisons don't have any meaning. There are times when it will be ineffective. There are times when it will be equally effective. There are times when it will be easier to do it. There are times and situations where it will not be. Both will have a role to play, and both will have we'll have to find the right fit. But to be critical about online therapy would be, cutting our own branch.
To what extent is self-care possible in mental health?
Self-care is the first step. Why only mental health? For physical health also. If you don't have a physical routine, if you don't follow a decent diet, if you do substance abuse, then you really can't be preventing or taking care of even illnesses like diabetes or hypertension. The same applies for mental health. You need to have support systems. You need to, ensure that you take breaks, you take self-care, you balance your life well. Once you do that, the quality of life becomes better. Once quality of life becomes better, it will translate into better functions, social, occupational, academic functions. It will be better for your physical health, your immunity. It will be better for your mental health. It starts with self-care.